The pandemic has brought science to the front page of our lives, and with it, science literacy challenges. Many members of the general public do not have a firm grasp of basic science concepts or the scientific process. People value anecdote over evidence, and the rapid spread of the virus was accompanied by a spread of misinformation. So how can we work toward a healthier science ecosystem? One problem is that scientists' relationship with the public has historically been unidirectional, non-inclusive, and non-transparent. We conduct research on the public, but we do not necessarily communicate with them about the research that we do. And vulnerable communities in particular can feel disconnected and suspicious of science, making them less likely to participate in studies or follow public health recommendations like we're seeing today. Now, one possible approach then to work toward making this healthier science ecosystem happen is by working on this relationship and making it more bidirectional, promoting an open dialogue, which can increase participants' trust and possibly inspire scientists to ask novel research questions that they might have been blind to had they not listened closely to the public's input. And so to provide a piece of a puzzle toward increasing this communication, we have built MindHive, which is a web-based open science, citizen science platform that supports real-world brain and behavior research for students and teachers who seek authentic STEM research experiences, for neuroscientists and psychologists who seek to address their research questions outside of the lab, and for community-based organizations who seek to conduct grassroots science-based research for policy change. Now, there are many benefits to building an online platform. We can promote interactions between geographically diverse schools, communities, and scientists, which also allows students to reach diverse participants and scientists too, by the way. And we can build remote student-scientist partnership programs, which might increase access to science for example, students who do not live in areas that are littered with academic institutions like Manhattan is. And then there is an unanticipated benefit, which is that we were able and are able to support remote learning, and that has served well, fortunately and unfortunately, throughout the past year. So the platform features a Discover area where students and participants can browse studies and then participate in them. Then there's an area where students and researchers can create studies. There's an interactive collaborative proposal feature. And then they can use their study builder functionality, pick from a database of well-validated, established tasks and surveys to promote iterative study design. Studies can be reviewed not only by classmates, but also by school network across the country before data collection happens. And then for the teacher experience, they can create classes and invite students to them. They can view activity of the students on the platform, and they can create assignments and view assignment submissions and journal entries. Now, in terms of open science, we're building the foundations for an open science infrastructure by making, first of all, the code open for inspection and contribution on GitHub, and that should promote transparency, but also ensure the longevity of the project. From a pragmatic perspective, the collaboration tool we develop needs to be free, easy to learn, and easy to use so that we can convince users to change or adapt their workflow and participate in the MindHive network. And then another requirement or a goal based on open science is the ability to share resources. And in our case, that would be anonymized data, for example, and study protocols, which can then be used for reanalyses, revamping, and future research. The development stack consists of 3 components. React and Next.js frameworks enable server rendering, and that speeds up page loading. Then the Apollo client interacts with the server using GraphQL API, which allows it to efficiently query large amounts of data or make changes to the database. And then the data in the database is encrypted and decoupled from the participant profile. That links to data protection, which is ensured by the authentication system with multiple levels of authorization, depending on participants' user role and their preferences. So for example, only researchers with institutional IRB approval will ever see contact details for their study participants. And then students have different avatar IDs for their teachers than they do for researchers. And if a student indicates that their data should only be used for educational purposes, the data will not be displayed to researchers at all, but will only be available within the scope of their individual class bubble. MindHive is GDPR compliant, among other features, by making people own their own data. So data users can always ask for their data to be deleted. Then we also support an open science approach through our learning experiences. So we've created a curriculum around the MindHive platform, in this case built using the COVID-19 pandemic as an example of what the right balance is between rigorous science and fast science, especially when there is time pressure, like think about vaccine development. We talk about different types of citizen science and ethics related to data collection from human subjects. And then they go through different case studies that I'll go into in a little bit before they develop their own research proposal. And then crucially, they receive peer feedback before they go into data collection and analysis. And so that latter feature is also an open science property where we don't really ask students to create full-fledged pre-registered reports, but we do emphasize peer feedback before going in and collecting all of your data. And we hope that students learn that it is really valuable to receive this feedback, not only from your peers, but also from students, strangers around the country. And this then also hopefully helps them to de-emphasize the result and put more emphasis on the study design. So the curriculum is very heavily focused on the quality of the study design, and that is what defines a good research study, and not whether or not your hypotheses were confirmed. As for citizen science, we don't follow the more traditional model where scientists develop a study, then ask the general public or students to help them data collect and then say thank you, grab the data, and then analyze and publish it. But we rather support an iterative community science style citizen science approach where students and the general public come in at every stage of the development and execution of a project, giving them ownership also in stages of ideation and reporting and data analysis. And so in this, flow where all the stakeholders take on different roles as a scientist, a participant, a creator, etc., we have two models that I'll illustrate. So there is the scientist-teacher-student partnership and the scientist-community partnership model. To start with the former, in the 2020-2022 years. We've had 15 implementations with 350 students and around 250 studies and 1,500 participants. And we started in the spring of 2020 with a fabulous group with a fantastic teacher, Kim Challoner at Grace Church School. And together with the 17 high school students, we went into lockdown and full remote learning at the height of the pandemic and tried to make sense of our environment and get a grasp on it through learning about science as it was unfolding. So first, students participated in scientist-initiated studies. In this case, these were studies designed by Rebecca Martin from NYU, who developed a study around climate change behavior, and Rob Rutledge of Yale, who developed a study around risk-taking. And each study on MindHive is enriched by a lesson around brain and behavior, the neuroscience of empathy, or the neuroscience of climate change, or the neuroscience behind risk-taking throughout the lifespan. And then students created their own studies exploring the relationship between COVID-19 and, for example, personality and pandemic coping, Zoom school and mental health, stress and social isolation, and social influence and public health behavior. And then NYU scientists took all the questions and hypotheses from these studies and developed a larger single study around how students coped during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we found, among other things, after recording data from 206 high school and undergraduate students in the fall of 2020 and the spring of 2021, that personality traits actually do affect how connected students felt to their peers and teachers in in-person versus remote learning environments. And we also saw that there was a mismatch between students' remote learning preferences and what they were offered. So students overwhelmingly would have preferred asynchronous offline learning, but they were not offered that learning model. In terms of what students learned, we had pre and post surveys, student artifacts, and student and teacher interviews, and found that there was an increase in students' fascination with science. We found that students had a sense of agency as citizen scientists, and that their appreciation for the collaborative nature of science increased through the unit. And then spring of 2021, we expanded to 3 high schools across the USA with 6 implementations and around 100 students. And we found that students, even though some of them moved away from the pandemic, still designed studies that were highly relevant to their daily lives about learning, mental health, climate change, political polarization. And we also found that by engaging in peer review, students learned to value collaboration and different perspectives. And students acquired skills with regard to the process and challenges of creating a scientific study and concrete strategies to improve their own studies and proposals. Now, moving on to the scientist community partnership, also in the middle of the pandemic, we started collaborating with not-for-profit Public Sentiment and a working group of 6 community representatives of Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is one of the hardest hit neighborhoods in New York City by the COVID-19 pandemic, both in terms of health and economic and mental health impact. And we co-designed with them and researchers from UC Berkeley a survey designed by and for residents around COVID-19 and issues relating to neighborhood safety, mental health, economic security, and public health behavior. So in terms of the latter, just to illustrate a couple of findings from this study for which data collection is ongoing, so these are preliminary results, we see that 31% of our respondents said that they would not get the COVID-19 vaccine, but 100% of the residents support following safety guidelines, and they do this to protect others and themselves, and not so much because of following the rules. So this possibly links back to what we started with, which is the importance of trust in science, as has been pointed out by many officials and scholars around vaccine hesitancy. So just to summarize, we aim as a platform that is very much still in development to help provide a piece of the puzzle toward this healthier science ecosystem that we're all trying for through a web-based open science, citizen science approach to brain and behavior research. And this is our non-exhaustive list of the MindHive team and collaborators. And I wanted to give special thanks to all the teachers and students who stuck with us through the process. It has been a very challenging and special year. And I wanted to thank the National Science Foundation for supporting our project. And you can reach us at info@mindhive.science. Thank you so much.